Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and so we are on Neon Genesis Evangelion, volumes 10, 11, and 12. So I thought going into reading this manga based on the covers, because I have been spoiled to the covers of the manga. You have to see them when you buy them, and I purchased these online. So when I saw the cover of this one, it had Kaoru in front of Lilith, in front of the seal symbol and the angel wings. And so at that time, when I bought them, I was like, oh cool, when I get to volumes 10, 11, and 12, that's when we'll go through the events of episode 24. And I was kind of half right. I think we're going to touch on the events of episode 24 through Sadamoto's perspective in this set of volumes, but we were introduced into Kaoru last set, and he's been a presence throughout the manga so far, and it's so crazy. Like, I've been talking to people in the comments that it is really cool to see all of these different versions and to round out with the manga and just see how different it is. It's very interesting. So I do have a couple of comments kind of relating to that before we start. Viper Leone Navarre talked about that there was in fact a typo in volumes 4 through 6. And I was like, oh my gosh, this made my day. I was like, thank you so much. Because it's been bothering me ever since. Was that in volumes 4 through 6, there was an interview with Asuka's voice actress, but it's right there in giant letters. The name of the voice actress is the same name as the voice actress for Rei and Yui and Pin. And I was like, but so is she voicing all the female characters in this series? It was very confusing. And I didn't know what to do with that because it's the official English translation. It's in huge letters. It wasn't like a little simple typo, like in small print that you're like, oh, they just overlooked that. It was in the main header. And I was like, what the heck? And Viper Leone did say, it is a typo. That actually the voice actors for Rei, Yui, and Pin is Megumi Hayashibara, who's in volumes 1 through 3. And then the voice actress for Asuka is Yuko Miyamura. And I was like, okay, whew, thank you. I was like, that was driving me crazy. And I didn't want to look it up because I didn't want to get into manga spoilers on accident. So I was just sitting there like, I felt like Will Ferrell from Zoolander. Am I taking crazy pills? And then no, it was a typo. That's a pretty big typo though. I feel like the editor would be like, oh well, just how confusing. But I also like the idea that Viper Leone talks about in the last several volumes, this idea of gender subversion, that specifically in volumes 4 through 6, talking about how both Kaji and Masato seemingly talk with Shinji about the situation with the Evas. And that's so true because you have on the one hand, Kaji like takes him to the aquarium, sits him down, puts his arm around him, comforts him, has him in the garden. It's a very feminine, traditionally stereotypical way of support. Whereas Masato's sitting there chugging a beer like, let me explain to you how this works. And it's a stereotypically masculine way of explanation that we've seen in literature. So is that necessarily, can you take those two approaches and say they're specifically tied to a gender? Of course not. Of course not. But in a lot of literature, it has become a stereotype and kind of a cliche for these gender roles. And I like that Sadamoto and Ano as well throughout Neon Genesis kind of subverts that. But Sadamoto definitely in the manga, and then Ano as well as the anime. So I thought that was really cool. So thank you for pointing that out, Viper Leone. That was great. Christopher Peterson, again, talks about the idea that each version of Neon Genesis kind of supports each other. And it is kind of cool, right? You have the original series, then you have the recap movie, then you have the manga, and then you have the rebuilds, and they're all kind of interwoven. Like there's parts of the manga that have inspired the rebuilds, there's parts of the OG series that have inspired the rebuilds, there's part of the OG series that has been maybe perhaps that ties in with the manga. It's all very cool how they thread together. I like that they all complement and supplement one another instead of being their own totally different things or all being the same thing. It's very neat. So thank you. And then finally, Alex Cordejo talks about in volumes 7 through 9, the idea of how Yui is presented. And I totally agree. I like that in that scene where Yui is trying to keep Shinji in the primordial soup, we get a version of Yui that is not as saintly as we've been presented with otherwise, or like she's presented in the anime. She actually is kind of creepy in the manga. But as Alex Cornejo pointed out, she's stuck in the Eva for all of eternity. Can we really blame her for wanting to keep her son there? It's like, can you blame her? She's like, hey, I've been stuck here by myself. I kind of regret that decision. I have regrets. You want to stick around? It's really interesting, but I like the way that Yui's portrayed in the manga, and I like that she's not this like paragon of motherly saint. Like, she's human. She has flaws herself, and I like that. And so, yeah, those are great comments. I really have enjoyed this manga an awful lot. After this set, we only have volumes 13 and 14, and then we'll do a recap for the series. But man, it has been really fun to go back to this manga and connect it to the original series, to connect it to the rebuilds. But I'm going to be honest, we ended the last volume like midway through where the anime was with episode 23. So we still have that. And then we have the contents of episode 24. And what's bizarre is that the way that Kaoru and Shinji are portrayed in the manga, you know, Shinji likely, I assume in the manga, will be just as dejected about Rei as he was in the original series. But in the anime, Shinji starts out in episode 24 feeling horrified and, you know, really upset at what's happened to Rei and Asuka. And then he's at this really low point and Kaoru kind of lifts him up and he instantly falls head over heels. In the manga, Kaoru's been there and Shinji's kind of been apprehensive of him and just kind of like, you know, wary of him. And they've kind of not been like swooning over each other. So I'm going to be curious to see how Sadamoto, will he bridge that gap and let Kaoru be there as a support and that's what wins Shinji over? Or how are we going to do this? Is it going to be different? Who knows? So that's what's going to be interesting to find out what all we go through, because then we still have 2 volumes left after this that I'm assuming will cover the events of episodes 25 and 26. However we want to go about that. That's my guess anyway. But yeah, let's not waste any more time. I'm excited to dive into this manga and see what Sadamoto cooks up for us, right? So we're going to start volumes 10, 11, and 12 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, the manga. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do this. Oh, so, okay, cool. So we're doing End of Evangelion. That's great. Doing End of Evangelion. But man, there's some changes that have happened. For the most part, what's really cool about this is that for the most part, I'd say for like 80% of the End of Evangelion parts that we've gotten so far, for about 80%, it's like right on par with how the actual movie has been. There's just been like a little bit of added things in terms of giving more clarification about Asuka's perspective with her mom, explaining more of that. The way that Sadamoto's kind of genius because the way he weaves Shinji's character, I was wondering going into this volume, I'm like, well, I didn't know if we would get through 3 volumes worth. That seemed like a lot for just episode 24. That seemed like a lot for just episode 24 and half of 23. I'm like, they're probably going to get into, are they going to get into 25 and 26 in this? No, they kind of bypass it and go straight into Evangelion, which, to be fair, you cannot, I don't think Sadamoto could do the storyline and cover episodes 25 and 26 because this is not the same as the OG series. It's just not. Shinji is not the same as he is in the anime. And so for the anime, that whole like artistic, stylistic, abstract quality of episodes 25 and 26, which I love, it fits the OG series because it matches where Shinji and the characters are emotionally and thematically. But here, the manga has made Shinji so different personality-wise and expression-wise that 25 and 26 wouldn't make sense. It'd be like, wow, especially because in 24, Shinji is head over heels in love with Kaoru. And here, it is much more complicated and much more complex and not so much head over heels Manic Pixie Dream Boy, that Shinji just diving into this great spiraling depression like he does in 25 and 26 doesn't make so much sense in the manga. So we just cut right into End of Evangelion. Makes sense. I mean, plot-wise, that works, right? It works plot-wise. And Sadamoto is so genius in how I was wondering, how's he going to get Shinji into the emotional state that he's in for End of Evangelion if him and Kaoru's relationship is so different than it was in the series? He makes it work. He really makes it work. By the end of this set of volumes, you're like, no, I get it. I get why Shinji is the way that he is. you cracked the code, Sadamoto. It all makes sense. And I love there's, like I said, 80% of the End of Evangelion content is like the anime, like the movie, which I like. But then the other 20% is either an expansion of what's canon, or we're going to tweak things around a little bit. Like, have Gendo save Shinji and have him, like, pledge his loyalty to revenge on God. And I'm like, what? Just, I was fully expecting Gendo. I was expecting Masato to be the one to save Shinji under that foyer. No, Gendo, shock of the century. That and Kaoru kissing Shinji. Well, it's like it's not an indirect kiss, but it's like, the second one is a kiss. The first one he was trying to like do maybe resuscitatory things, but the second one he was kissing him. And it's like, oh, Shinji just can't get away from people just kissing without his consent. I'm like, dude, I'm like, Kaoru, my dude. Holy cow, we've got a lot to talk about with this, to go through this. The artwork, God, what can we say? The artwork I've already taken. I went back and took a ton of screenshots before I came back. I went in reverse, and it's just like color spread after color spread. The way that he draws Kaoru, you can tell Sadamoto really likes drawing Kaoru, so his little commentary about falling in love with him, no, that checks out. That makes sense. But even like the dinginess of the room that Rei's in, God, I love it. Kaoru is so interesting in the manga version. Him and Shinji's relationship, it's very complicated, and I like it a lot. But man, Rei! I honestly, the way that they handled the end of this first set of chapters that deal with the events of episode 23, I wondered with Kaoru being present there, I'm like, how are we going to do this? Like, is Kaoru going to out himself that he's an angel? How are we going to do this? He can't, and he doesn't, but they handle it pretty much just like the anime. Except the manga has a few extra things happen that I really like. One, Kaoru's leg in the Eva gets snapped off. I like that Kaoru ends up being affected by it, right? He actually feels that physical pain. And he's like, the bastards! He's like, if it goes on, I don't know what's going to happen. And he's like, what should I do? Right? And so I like that Kaoru's like, he's affected by the angel, but in the end, he's like, well, I just got to sit here and grin and bear it. I'm not really going to be affected because I'm an angel myself, but I can't, show that I'm an angel to them. Otherwise the cover's blown, right? And meanwhile, Shinji wants to go up there and help Rei and Kaoru. And we have the same thing that happens with Rei and the angel talking to her, right? And Kaoru's like, well, I guess I'll just sit here quietly. But the angel in this version, it gets kind of catty when it talks to Rei. It talks about loneliness, but it tries to pit Shinji against Asuka. And Rei's just like, but there's a part of it that the angel's feeding on maybe an actual emotion for Rei. So maybe Rei was partially jealous of Asuka because Shinji was spending a lot of time going and checking on her. Maybe she was jealous, but she didn't want to acknowledge it or know how to acknowledge it. And the angel kind of brings it out. And that leads to Rei crying because she realizes that she does love Shinji. And she's kind of upset that he's spending all this time with Asuka, who doesn't like him back the same way. And she's sad about it. And the crazy thing is that she cries and she has the tears, just like in the anime. And then the angel, all the different versions all plop up out of her. But what's fascinating is that Kaoru, who is connected through the angel to Rei, ends up starting to cry as well. Because he starts getting affected by it. He's like, something's flowing into me. And it's when she touches the Eva that is with Shinji. And he's like, what's going on? What is this? And it's the tears that Rei had. So what I like is that, and Sadamoto even recognizes it and acknowledges it in the reaction when he's like, yeah, some of Rei's feelings for Shinji did flow into Kaoru. But I agree with Sadamoto. I like to recognize it because there's a part of me that was a little upset at first because like, oh, are they going to say that Kaoru only likes Shinji because Rei liked Shinji and he absorbed some of her emotions and was influenced by them? But that's not the case. And Sadamoto kind of says that no, those feelings, Kaoru's attractiveness to Shinji develops on his own. It's only through Rei that he figures out what those feelings represent. He figures out that Rei did love Shinji. And he's kind of jealous of her because of it, but he develops those feelings for Shinji on his own after he realizes what they are. So I'm like, okay, cool. I like that. I like that a lot. But God, and then just the things that Sadamoto has, Sadamoto is bound and determined that we are going to just be absolutely traumatized by the end of this, like we are with Ano. Sadamoto's like, I'll traumatize you in new ways. Because yeah, Shinji has been this like go forward moving, like go to young man this whole time who gets kind of sassy, gets kind of snarky, but he has a reason behind it, right? And Shinji's anger and frustration make a lot of sense. One, with Toji dying and Kinsuke and Hikari leaving him. His friends have all left him. And then Asuka is, hospitalized in like a comatose state. She can't communicate with him. Rei, and then so not only has he killed Toji in front of his own eyes, but now he has to drive a knife into this angel that looks exactly like Ayanami, and it affects Ayanami. And Shinji's just like, why is this all happening to me? And then Rei makes the decision to, self-destruct, and Kaoru realizes what she's going to do. It's interesting, the last thing that Rei sees is Gendo. Again, tying maybe to Yui. But God, the artwork of the angel hands reaching up into the heavens, the idea of the explosion. I love that we get Rei's final thoughts where she says she wanted to connect with people. And she's like, I struggled and I trembled and I shed blood and I was alive. And then I realized this fact in my final moments, Ikari-kun. Dang. That spread of just her blowing up it's incredible. And then and everything seems to like go down. The one thing is like we have the moment on the beach, but everything's kind of jumbled up from episode 24. So episode 24 starts with Shinji upset that Rei's dead, and then he meets Kaoru, and the events of him and Kaoru meeting and their little honeymoon tryst kind of unfold in episode 24. Here, everything's already kind of skewed in terms of the timeline, so we don't get the beachside moment yet. That comes later, and instead we kind of cut to him. We've already had the shower scene instead of the bathtub scene, but we have him coming up to Shinji, like with his, short t-shirt and towel on, and he's like, hey, are you ignoring me? And Kaoru doesn't understand. Kaoru's still learning about human emotions, but he shows more concern for Shinji. That's it, right? He shows more concern for him than he did perhaps before. And he's like, hey, I'm trying to talk to you. And Shinji is just, dumbfounded. And so he's like, well, if it's about the first child, she was a fool. She killed herself. Huh? And then Shinji gets mad. I like that Shinji gets mad in this. He's like, and it kind of ties back again to Shinji and Toji fighting amongst each other and using their fists. But it also ties in the weirdest ways to Gendo saying later on in the volume that he loved Yui and he was, would brawl for her if he could. And this kind of connects to Shinji wanting to do the same for Rei. And he's like, say it again and I ought to kick your front teeth out. And Kaoru's like, holy cow. And he goes to hit him and then he passes out. And I love Kaoru's expression as he's holding Shinji. He's like, what do I do? He's like, I don't know what to do to this guy. He's about to punch me and now he's passed out. And then we cut back to Kaoru seeing Shinji in his room. So it's kind of like episode 24 where Shinji was invited to Kaoru's room, except that was under them being friends. Here, it's because Shinji doesn't want to go back home. And it's vocalized here, right? So he's like, I don't want to go back and think about it. He's like, I think that, and again, we have the Evian product placement. He's like, I wonder if she's dead. I don't want to think about it, but there's no way she's alive, right? And he cries for her, and Kaoru doesn't know what to do with that. And Shinji's just crying about her being dead. And it's so sweet because Shinji's like, we touched hands 4 times, and each time, she's like, the first time nothing was felt. The second time you felt queasy. The third time she felt warm. The 4th, she was happy. And he's like, what about the 5th time? What about the 5th time? How did you feel? And I also think it's funny we have 5 children in this, and there's 5 times that she's touched Shinji's hand. It's interesting. But he's like, I wanted to know how she felt that last time. And it almost seems like Shinji saying, like, you go from not knowing someone at all to, like, when you first start to, like somebody, you kind of feel queasy about it, like you got butterflies in your stomach, to the 3rd time that you feel warm inside, and then the 4th time you're happy. And I think Shinji was waiting for her to say, like, that he felt, because when they join their hands in the one panel, it looks like a heart, right? I think he was wanting to know, did she like him more than a friend? And yeah, there's some weird ramifications with her being like the clone of Lilith and his mom, but at the same time, there's also weird things with Kaoru being the son of Adam. So we'll just go with it, right? But he said, Ayanami, we promise that we both go on living, and I don't want to lose her. So yeah, he's like, I don't want to lose you. So I clearly think that in the manga, there's a lot more Shinji and Rei shipping than probably anything. But to be fair, there is still some Shinji Asuka moments. The Shinji Asuka moments kind of get pushed to the side. And then here in this set of volumes, it's Shinji and Kaoru kind of take the front. Although it's not a romance like you expect it to be, it's quite different. I will say, there is something about Shinji, like, staring straight ahead, and there's, like, this romance on the TV screen. I'm like, dude, you're mourning the loss of this girl you kind of liked. Maybe you shouldn't be watching romance. But it's just like, you know, you expect Shinji to have a pint of ice cream, just, like, finding his own grief. And I like the Kaoru's just skimming through a magazine, like kicking his legs. And he's like, how long are you going to be like this? And Shinji brings up a really good point. He's like, in his process of grieving, he's like, if I go back, I have to face the fact that she's actually gone. So this is Shinji running away again, but it makes sense. He's like, I don't want to face that. He's like, if I go back, he's like, what's worse? He's like, Misato's going to be sad and she's going to try to cheer me up. He's like, but I can't handle that either. He's like, it won't be just Misato. It'll be everybody feeling sad and it'll just make her death hit all the more. And if I'm alone and I'm alone, it hits and I'm alone and it keeps hitting down until it crushes me. That's why it's better to be here. So it's really sad because Shinji's saying, like, I don't have anybody to help me grieve. And so if I go home and face all these emotions, it's going to keep hitting me until I'm just completely ruined because I'm all by myself. And meanwhile, Kaoru's sitting here being like, you're not by yourself, but okay. And he's like, that's why it's better for me to be here because you're the only one who's not hurting inside over her. And that's kind of a cold thing for Shinji to say because it's like Shinji assumes that Kaoru's not affected at all by Rei's death. What he doesn't realize is that Kaoru is affected by Rei's death. Now, whether he's truly sad over it, that's up for debate, but he's been infected, so to speak, by Rei's disposition in some regards. So yeah, he kind of, to say he has no connection to Rei is not true at this point, right? And Kaoru just laughs it off. He's like, so what you're telling me is that you hate me, but it's more comfortable here, right? And Shinji can't deny it. And Kaoru's like, fine, suit yourself. You can just have the bed if you want. It's so sad because Kaoru, I feel like ever since the encounter with Rei, when he learned what love is, and he's now with Shinji, I think Kaoru has started to develop these feelings, and Shinji's just not in the right state of mind to even recognize that, right? But they get the call that Rei is alive, right? So his phone starts ringing and Shinji starts to stir and Kaoru wakes up, but Shinji's having like a panic attack. And Kaoru, who doesn't know much about how this stuff works, he's like, oh, I guess he's having a breathing problem again. And I love this thing. He's like, I guess I need to go find a bag or something. But then he thinks, well, what if I just give him some air through the mouth? That seems like it'll work. And if you told me the first time he did it was just to try to resuscitate Shinji, I would believe you. After that, though, when he looks back at Shinji, he kind of just lingers there. He lingers there. And she's like, oh, it looks like your breathing's under control. Guess you won't need a bag. And Shinji's like, what are you doing? Shinji's like, I did not ask you to kiss me. And he's like, what's it like to fall in love? He's like, I've been sitting here watching these rom-coms this whole time now that you've been asleep. And so he goes through the motions with it because he's like, these questions he's asking are all ones that have kind of seeped into his system from that encounter with Rei. And he's like, it slowly was constricting my chest like I couldn't breathe. So this is love, right? And Shinji's just looking at him like, well? He's like, how does it feel to have someone like that take an interest in you? How would I feel if you had feelings for me? So Kaoru's, wondering, he's like, how would I feel if you loved me? Would I feel the same way that Rei would? Would I have those emotions? And then Shinji, of course, is like, Shinji gets all homophobic saying, guys don't like guys. And Kaoru's like, why do you hate me so much? So there's a little bit of that episode 24 draft in this. And Shinji says, because you're so weird. And I do love the expression Shinji gives when he jumps off the bed. He's like, get me out of the situation. Because it's not the weird aspect of Kaoru liking guys. It's the weird aspect that Kaoru's asking all these questions and is making Shinji uncomfortable because he's having to face these harsh truths dead on, right? But that's when he finds out about Rei. Sadamoto does an amazing job of drawing the third Rei and making her look much different. Like, her expression is so much more grisly and grim. Like, she just seems so detached, and she almost looks at Shinji like, who are you? Like, it's really good. Because in the anime, Rei always looks the same, no matter what. So the comment about, I'm the third one, in the anime, it's a little more like, what is this? But here, it's so clear that it's a different Rei, that it doesn't have the same soul. And the fact that Sadamoto can illustrate that he can illustrate the soul of a character, that's really cool. I really like that. And so then we get the idea that Rei has been cloned over and over again, and Akagi is brought before Seal. I do love the way that, again, Kaoru is drawn, being like, oh, you're leaving, so... And then I love Kaoru called Shinji a self-centered bastard. He's like, he leaves as soon as he finds out she's still alive. Again, it's a cool parallel that you have both Ritsuko and Kaoru being jealous of Rei in this chapter. Because Ritsuko is jealous of Rei because she's being chosen by Gendo. And Kaoru is jealous of Rei because she's been chosen by Shinji. It's great, right? What a family. I do love that he just throws the magazine and he's like Kaoru developing emotions over the course of this volume set is great, right? And so then we have Kagi, who's brought before Seal. Rei, we have all the moments with the glasses and stuff from the episode. And I do like that everybody's just thinking, you have Ritsuko and Kaoru in between, on either side of Gendo, and Rei in between there. Interesting. And so, yeah, we get the flashback. Now, the manga confirms that, one, Ritsuko saw her mom choke out baby Rei. So that is different than the anime. But the other thing is that when Ritsuko calls out to her mom after she's killed Rei, she runs and throws herself off the Magi Mill Choir, which was the one that represented the woman. So that's fascinating, right? We get it. I mean, it's speculated in the anime, it's speculated, but the manga kind of confirms it here in Sadamoto's take of the situation. So, fascinating. But then, the thing that gets me is that Ritsuko goes to the cemetery and she says that she couldn't stop it. Things were never going to work out like this. She's like, but I'm not going to be like my mom. And who does she see right after she says that? Gendo. And he's like, you're the only one who can support me now that Naoko is gone. Help me like your mother did. And he like bows before her, like prostrates himself to ask her. I'm like, ah. And she helps him despite it all. I'm like, oh man, oh, like mother, like daughter. It's, Gendo is much more villainous in the manga than he is in the anime. Much more villainous than he is in the rebuilds. And we'll talk about that whole scene about Shinji. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But I was like, we're not going the same route as the rebuilds, clearly. Okay. And so that's when Ritsuko invites Shinji, and she's very seductive as she invites him, to go and find the other Reis. And it's pretty much beat for beat exactly like the anime, even down to the point of the reveal and the destruction of the dummy system and the Reis, right? Right down to it. And so then we have the end of volume 11, or the end of volume 10. Okay. So we have a few sections. We didn't get a section after, there wasn't an interview or anything after volume 11, so. And the one after volume 12 is pretty short. But this one, The Mysterious Stranger, the anime, the manga, and the Mark Twain novella. God will provide for this kitten. What makes you think so? Ursula's eyes snapped with anger. Because I know it, she said. Not a sparrow falls to the ground without seeing it. But it falls just the same. What good is seeing it fall? There is a short novel by Mark Twain written near the end of his life and published posthumously, entitled The Mysterious Stranger. The tale is set in a small village in the 16th century Austria, where three boys one day meet a young man different from themselves. He had new and good clothes on, he was handsome and had a winning face and pleasant voice. and he was easy and grateful and unembarrassed, not slouchy and awkward and diffident like other boys. The mysterious stranger starts to do small but amazing tricks for them, causing water to turn to ice, conjuring grapes and bread out of thin air, even making birds out of clay that can fly. At last, one boy, the story's narrator, works up the courage to ask the stranger who he is. An angel, he said, quite simply, and set another bird free and clapped his hands and made it fly away. The angel then proceeds to really impress them by making an entire toy castle complete with 500 miniature soldiers and workmen that move around by themselves. Naturally, the boys get involved with this ultimate playset, making their own knights and cannon and cavalry, and although they get rather nervous again when the angel reveals his name is Satan, he assures them he is not that Satan, but only named after the fallen one. Oh, I haven't read The Mysterious Stranger, but now I kind of want to. We others are still ignorant of sin. We are not able to commit it. We are without blemish, and we shall abide in that estate always. Distracted by two of the miniature workmen, Satan reached out his hand and crushed the life out of one of them with his fingers, and went on talking where he had left off. We cannot do wrong. Neither have we any disposition to do it, for we do not know what it is. Horrified as the other boys are, quote, he made us drunk with the joy of being with him and looking into the heaven of his eyes and the feeling of ecstasy that thrilled along our veins from the touch of his hand. Yes, Kaoru Nagisa made quite an impression on the fans of Neon Genesis Evangelion, despite the fact that in the original broadcast version of the TV show, before it got all director's cutted, box-setted, special editioned, and platinum-lined, he shows up only for slightly less than 13 minutes of total screen time, the climax of which being an entire minute where nothing happens at all. That's what being a beautiful angel will do for you, especially when you make the most of your 13 minutes on Earth by having a whirlwind romance with the main character that ends in a lover's quarrel with prog knives and finally a voluntary martyrdom at the hand of your young boy here. Relationships don't come any more tragic than that of Nagisa Kaoru and Shinji Ikari, and when fans, including this one, first saw it on TV, the affair was so brief and shocking, the story logic of it didn't click until much later. In the anime, Kaoru is acknowledged as the final messenger, and of all the angels Shinji has to fight, this is the most ruthless battle, one at the highest possible cost to himself. It took even longer for me to realize that the showdown in episode 24 had also taken us full circle from Shinji's first fight in episode 1 and 2, which emphasized his personal helplessness against the looming angel Sachiel. Against Kaoru, it is the angel who becomes the small, helpless figure, while Shinji is represented only by the gargantuan, frightful helm and arm of his EVA 01 unit. We never see Shinji's human face once during the whole final minute of decision. Oh, so as Colonel Troutman would have said instead of Major Katsuragi, it's over, Shinji, it's over. Kaoru versus Shinji, or Kaoru times Shinji in the doujinshi, was the big final showdown between humanity and the angels. And with the outcome leaving Shinji at his most wretched ever, wouldn't it be nice if everyone just died, your wish being Eva's command, as it turns out that, fortunately, humanity hardly ever needed the angels to slaughter itself. Oh, that's really good. Yeah, the comparison of Sachiel versus Shinji to Kaoru versus him in episode 24. And then the quote from The Mysterious Stranger, I am perishing already. I am failing. I am passing away. In a little while, you will be alone in a shoreless space, to wander its limitless solitudes without friend or comrade forever. But I, your poor servant, have revealed you to yourself and set you free. Dream other dreams and be better. Ooh, okay. Satan's words near the end of Mark Twain's story also uncannily prefigure the end of the world and the instrumentality, both of which follow his death in the TV show. In such quick order, you picture Anno as a hair-netted fry cook dinging the counter bell. By now, you see Sadamoto's handling of Kaoru, and perhaps nothing illustrates the different experiences of the manga and the anime better than this handling of this critical character. No longer the last angel to be fought, Kaoru actually becomes an active EVA pilot and fights an angel. The dude even has the nerve to observe the fight is fixed, based on his knowledge of Seal's prophecies. Sadamoto, of course, introduces him at an earlier point in the narrative, at the equivalent of episode 19's end, and then sends him to Nerve near the equivalent of episode 22's beginning, before certain important events, to put it mildly, can occur. When one notes this kind of thing, of course, it's important to restate that the Evangelion manga has always been a separate but equal official version of EVA, with no particular obligation to align itself with the anime. And indeed, it was with Book 5, the first released after the End of Evangelion, that Sadamoto began to truly seem free to go his own direction. Oh, cool. So after Volume 5, that explains it. Yeah, because that happened after End of Evangelion. Okay, so he could kind of do whatever he wanted. All right. Nevertheless, as the other official version of the EVA story, it is reasonable for fans to view it as an alternate history relative to the anime, and the way Kaoru has been introduced makes us realize the manga may end very differently indeed. Despite the fact that we know here that Kaoru is an angel from the very beginning, he appears destined to at least hang around long enough to pick up a few paychecks. It's not clear when your health benefits kick in at Nerve, although if Ritsuko is your primary caregiver, it may be best to forego them. And here's another quote from the Mysterious Stranger. An angel's love is sublime, adorable, divine, beyond the imagination of man, infinitely beyond it. But it is limited to his own august order. If it fell upon one of your race for only an instant, it would consume its object to ashes. No, we cannot love men, but we can be harmlessly indifferent to them. We can also like them, sometimes. In Volume 9, we see the most staggering difference thus far between the manga and the anime. Sadamoto's Shinji doesn't even like Kaoru, much less love him. Of course, you could say the less ethereal Kaoru of the manga is harder to love. I can't believe Sadamoto had him tell Rei he thought she'd be heftier, and yet he did. I don't think any AT field actually got penetrated in the anime. While I do think Shinji felt sexually attracted... Oh, I like that pun! I just realized that was a pun! No, AT fields actually got penetrated in the anime. Oh my god. While I do think Shinji felt sexually attracted to Kaoru, and that you, the audience, are supposed to feel that he felt it, what Kaoru himself thought was a very different matter. Like Rei, I believe Kaoru to be innocent. Coyly, he appears not to be so, because while Rei needed to be reached out to, Kaoru has come to reach out. Whereas Rei has spent her existence being observed, Kaoru has come to observe. Indeed, in the manga, Shinji's irritation about Kaoru's invasion of his personal space seems almost a parody of his attitude in the anime. In the TV show, when Kaoru put his hand on Shinji's, he flinched, but he did not pull away. Whereas in the manga, it's easy to imagine Shinji slugging him. Instead, he goes to run after Rei, hoping to get closer to her again. I hardly think the change reflects any phobia on Sadamoto's part. After all, we even get to see Shinji's Unit 1 in the manga. But the fact is, the manga Shinji is less emotionally bleak and empty, and hence less vulnerable. Shinji's just as negative in the manga, of course, but it's an active variety. Rather than the passive negative creep, in the best Nirvana song sense, we know from the anime. We don't have to imagine him slugging Gendo. From the look of surprise on Dad's face in Book 7, he would have smacked the beard off his face if Kaji hadn't stopped him! Yeah, neither is Shinji in a positive emotional situation, where we leave him here either. Indeed, at this point in the manga, there's arguably no one he can turn to. The more brutal fate that befell Toji has cut him off from his school friends. Rei has become hesitant, Kaji is dead, and his perennial self-esteem booster Asuka is going to need to rebuild her internal supply before she can even get to calling him a loser and idiot. So, like Masato trying to put her own hand on Shinji's, all I can do for now, while we wait for Sadamoto Sensei, is to recommend for your winter vacation reading list, The Mysterious Stranger, which I can almost guarantee will give you new angles to think about Kaoru, and maybe even earn you class credit besides. A quick look at the novel's comments on Amazon lists a teacher who says fundamentalist students walked out of his class when he taught it. Another compares it to The Matrix. Those who dislike it call it sick, bitter, and twisted. Sounds like good old Evangelion to me. Carl Gustav Horn. Although The Mysterious Stranger can be found in a number of print editions, including the portable Mark Twain from Penguin Books, the story is legally available online at gives an address. Oh, so good. So if you guys check this out, you can actually go to a site and look at it. The same site has a book called The Holy Bible, King James Version, which fans of Evangelion might also enjoy, although it's technically editor's choice. Oh my god! That's funny. That's really funny. Oh my god. But yeah, Kaoru is much different in this version. And it's interesting. And I like the way that I liked how Horn described Shinji as being still in a negative emotional state, but instead of a passive aggressive one, being in a more like reactive and proactive state, which is interesting. He's in a more active role, which is curious. But yeah, I'm adding The Mysterious Stranger to my book list to read for the winter. So yay. Good on you, End of Evangelion. Good on you, Neon Genesis. Way to go. I do love, there's little subtle product placements throughout this. Like there's a Sony dish in the Kaoru and Shinji spread that they're in, and then the Evian bottles of water. You can tell I don't know how to pronounce that because I ain't bougie with water. Tap water's fine. Put a filter on it if you're that picky. So yeah. So then, yep, we cut to basically the events leading up through episode 24 and through 23, where we find out about Rei. And I love that Kaoru even brings up to her that we're similar, but not the same. Like he's trying to like remind her of her former self and kind of also poking fun at it at the same time because she doesn't remember. And then we go to the beach scene that was at the start of episode 24. And we see Shinji, we see him get the message from Kinsuke and all the friends are gone and he's stuck on the beach. But it's so dramatically different. Like instead of Kaoru like instantly calling him Shinji and instantly then blushing at each other, Kaoru's like, you don't even think we're friends. And Shinji's like, nope. He's like, come on. He's like, the first person, he's like, isn't it sad? He's like, come on, talk to me. And he's like, I'm not going to be friends with you. And Kaoru gets mad. He's like, and I like that Kaoru, because he's an angel and because he's still learning about humanity, Shinji's like, I'm just so tired of losing all these people. He's like, it would have been better if I never had friends in the first place because I don't want to feel... In a way, Shinji is saying, he's like, I don't need any more friends. It's not that he doesn't want Kaoru to be his friend, but he's like, I've lost every friend around me. I'm not going to add you to the mix and then lose you too and have to deal with it. But Kaoru being an angel and having no clue socially what to do, he's like, well, I don't care about them. I want to know what you think about me. And it's like... It's crazy. And Shinji goes, I don't like you. He's like, well, that was before. What about now? He's like, we kissed. Don't you like me now? And Shinji's like, let me go. And so, yeah, and it's really sad. Like, he like walks away from Kaoru. It's not the anime. Like, I feel like the anime has such rose-colored glasses. It's like, man, it's just like, it's a big doujinshi dream. And this is like, no, this is a lot more complicated. And I love Kaoru and Shinji as a pairing. But as frustrating as it is, and how much I'm like, dang it, and you want the sunshine and rainbows that episode 24 gives you with them, I kind of like that this is more realistic. It's like, no, Shinji's not just going to fall in love with you. That's not how this works. And I like that it's Kaoru that is like having the moment of, why doesn't he like me? And he's the one catching feels. I like it. I like it a lot. But man, so Gendo... He like takes Adam and like puts it in. You can already see he has veins in his hand already though. Like, interesting. Curious, but he has the sample and he eats it. I love that because we've established that Gendo has ate the flesh of Adam and is becoming him. And Kaoru has the spirit of Adam, right? And so I like that on the same double spread, you have Kaoru standing above on top of the broken angel talking to Seal, and you have Gendo eating Adam. It's really gross. And Kaoru, like, Seal's like, you seem dejected, Kaoru. And he's like, yeah, my boyfriend isn't gonna be my boyfriend. Like, I wanted him to. But yeah, and then basically the events of episode 24 happen, where it all goes pretty beat for beat, up until, even for Rei showing up, everything, like, up until, and what's interesting is that it all kind of plays out and makes sense why Shinji and Kaoru are like this based on their interactions from before. It all makes sense because they've never really cared for one another. But then when he gets back here, Kaoru kind of throws it in his face. Kaoru's like, I am going to have my cake and eat it too. He's like, Shinji, you're going to kill me. If you like me, you're going to kill me and do what I want you to. And it's like, he's like, they have raised me, Seal has, my entire life to cause the third impact. He's like, I was created for this moment, but I have my own will. He's like, no. He's like, I don't want to do what Seal wants me to do. And I love the way he glances off to the side. He's like, all I have left is to freely choose how I'll die. And I want to die by your hands. And Shinji's like, why? And he's like, well, he's like, you don't even care about me, so what's it gonna hurt? He's like, just kill me like you did that cat. And at that point you realize, no, Shinji did care about him, but maybe not love him, but he did care about him. And he just didn't want to lose another friend. So he ran away. The Hedgehog's dilemma. He put that barrier between them. He put up that wall. And he's like, it's my last request. And if you ever felt anything for me, you'll grant me this wish. And I love that we get the cut back to the cat. He's like, do what's kinder. And Shinji's like, I can't. And he's like, do you hate me this much? And then Shinji admits, he's like, I never said that I hated you. And Kaoru's like, there we go. It's like that's what he wanted all along, was for Shinji to admit that he didn't hate him. And he's like, well, then show me who you really are. The next thing you do is proof of what you really think of me. I'm asking you to do this because I care for you. And if you care for me back, do this. And then he's like, no weapons. I want you to do it with your bare... When he says, I want you to do it with your bare hands so you'll remember it. Oh, so you'll never forget me. And it is kind of... There is a pettiness there because he's telling Shinji, he's like, you missed all your friends that have died at your hands up until now, right? I want to be one of them. He's like, I want you to never forget me. He's like, you'll never forget me even if you try, right? Like all the other people you've lost until now. And that shot where Shinji's like, yeah, probably no. For sure. I'm not going to forget you. It's, oh God, it fits the manga characters really well. Right? And then the cut from the Eva squeezing him, right? And you see the hands grasping over him, and you cut from that to Shinji choking him in the field. Crazy talk. And then it disappears. And so it makes sense that Shinji's upset when Masato finds him. He doesn't seem like he's completely devastated, but he is upset because he's like, there went another friend. He's like, I'm all alone again. And you could tell he's like, the right thing. He's like, and I love this monologue. It explains, because that was one thing going into episode 25 and 26, that Shinji's been so quiet and kind of hard to read emotionally leading up to this point. I mean, obviously, how he felt when Kaoru dies was very explicit, but we don't get a lot of internal monologue with Shinji during, leading up into episodes 25 and 26. And so when in episodes 25 and 26, they're like, oh, Shinji, you want to start the instrumentality, right? It's like, wait, when did he say that? And here, the manga makes it a lot clearer, where we get that internal monologue where he says, what Masato says should be protected and what I want to protect are not the same. The things I want to keep safe, I keep losing one after the other. What I want to protect so desperately, if what Kaoru said would happen because of the third impact, the world I'm trying to protect, would it really be necessary? He's kind of just thinking, what happens if I do let the third impact happen? And then we cut to the next chapter where he's like, before I knew it, deep in my heart, I was drawn to him. He's like, why do we become attracted to others? So I think that just like in the anime, Shinji was attracted to Kaoru, but he wasn't like head over heels, like love, bubbles popping out of him, right? And Masato, I like that Masato kind of gives that, like, Masato being a true ally here is like, well, God made people that way. Like, or you could say we were made incomplete. We can't live alone. She's like, well, that's just how humanity is. We're not meant to be alone. We need something else to complete us. But at this point, Shinji's just done. And I like that this chapter, 300 pages into this chapter kind of goes into where End of Evangelion starts. But Shinji being detached, it fits his character really well in the manga because he's just done. He's just exhausted. He's like, I've lost everybody at this point. I know that you're right, Masato, but I don't want to listen anymore. He's like, do you understand how I felt all this time? And then she's like looking at him and she's like, is this really what you think? And he's like, what, you going to hit me? You could. And then he just walks out of the car. And I like that Masato's like, the nerve of this kid, as we go into nerve. And then we cut to basically the beginning of End of Evangelion. Now, the very first scene of End of Evangelion is a bit different. Is a bit different. We don't have the Shinji masturbation scene with Asuka. Instead, she kind of freaks out on him. He keeps like trying to wake her up, and he's like, he's like, I want you to make fun of me, call me names, order me around. This isn't the Asuka that I want to protect, not this empty shell. And that's what wakes her up, because she's had this entire time the whole thing about not wanting to be a puppet, and she's not a doll. And when Shinji's like, I want to protect you, not this just husk of it. And she's just like, oh, I'm not a husk. And she like strangles him, which I don't want spoilers, but if the manga volume 14 ends with them on the beach and he's over the top of her, choking her, that's going to be interesting. If we're going to parallel that, if we do end up with a beach scene at the end of Evangelion with Shinji and her, and he's choking her like she's choking him here, that's going to be interesting. But yeah, the idea that he's like, he's like, this isn't the Asuka I want to protect. It's kind of like, damn, Shinji. He's like, I want to protect the Asuka that I know. And she just screams at him. And they're like, you need to leave. And I like that, again, we have the hand that he looks at, but instead of having his, semen all over it, it's blood, right? And then he sees Rei, and she's just a totally different Rei and ignores him. Mm-hmm. And Shinji starts crying, not knowing what to do. And it fits, right? It fits Shinji's character. It makes sense. It's so crazy, right? I love that Sadamoto did draw the Masato boss walk into Nerve, like just in the anime. It's great. I'm glad Sadamoto got that in. But yeah, everything pretty much follows the same line as End of Evangelion. It follows beat for beat through the end of volume 11 into volume 12. I do love the color spreads of volume 12. So yeah, so we see Shinji at his lowest point. He's meandering through Nerve, trying to figure out what to do, and he's just lost. And that's when Masato realizes that Shinji is in the stairwell. And I didn't realize this at the time, but oh man, Sadamoto foreshadows it. There's a moment where Masato sees Shinji in the stairwell, and she's like, if Shinji stays there, he's gonna die. No. And that is when Gendo stands up and leaves. That's when Gendo leaves. He's like, Fuyutsuki, you take care of the rest. I was so caught up in just laughing at the fact that Fuyutsuki was being put in charge again that I didn't realize that that's when Gendo went to go save Shinji. Crazy. Look at that. And the fact that the atom, the eye and stuff is on his hand, like it's just an eyeball. But when he talks to it, he's like, this is where you chose to appear. Does that mean you like the ugliest part of my body? The ugliest part being his hand is a really cool reference to not only if you're referring to Shinji in End of Evangelion where he's like masturbated on his hand, there's that, but the idea that your hand not only does that, but that it is your way of connecting with people. The way that he shook hands with Rei, when you touch someone, when you hold someone, that hand is that symbol of breaking through that AT field and connecting with someone through that hand. And for Gendo to say this is the ugliest part of my body, this hand, it's very intriguing, right? The symbolism of it. But yeah, I thought Masato was going to rescue Shinji from underneath the stairwell like it happened in End of Evangelion, but nope, Gendo's the one to save him. What the hell? And then we have the cover spread of Masato looking like Rambo. And then Gendo, he's like, you're the only one who can pilot the Eva. And I do like that Shinji stands up for himself and he's like, you're my dad, you're not my commander, you're my father. Why aren't you acting like it? And Gendo's like, I've never loved you. And it's like, at this point, I do want to say, I don't know how they're going to resolve Gendo's storyline. This seems more in line with the anime in that Gendo didn't like him and was afraid of him in the anime, right? Seems more in line with that. The rebuilds, what I love about the rebuilds is they give a lot of context to Gendo. And they give context to his actions and his motivations, which they kind of do here. But in the rebuilds, at the end of the day, he realized that he did love Shinji because he did find Yui within him. And he did love his son. Not in this! Mm-mm. He's like, no, you took Yui's loving for yourself. And we get a little bit of that flashback where he says, she was the only one who found me in the darkness and came to me like a light from God. And we see him like come to him. But then when that light was taken from him, which ironically is through their own means, then he cursed God. And there's this part here where he's like, if he was going to take her away, why'd he give her to me? And part of that's so interesting because there's a commentary there about, why be in a relationship if you're going to eventually lose that person? And it's like, well, it's better to have loved and lost than to not have loved at all, right? There's that argument that Gendo seems to reject. But also I'm like, she's dead because of what you all did. So she's gone not because of God, but because you were trying to imitate him. So it's kind of Gendo's fault that she's gone, and he just can't deal with it. But there's a part here, he talks about like the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. And then he talks about Shinji saying like, there's no hope here. Everything's going to be taken from us, which is a mentality Shinji's had up until this point. And he's like, I don't want to atone to God. I want revenge on him. He says, I don't want to lose anything ever again. And that mentality, Shinji can kind of relate to that. He's like, yeah, he does understand how his dad feels. But for Gendo to say, if you hate the world as I do, become an avenger with me. And Shinji's like, what the hell? And Masato's like, get away from that zealous father of yours, Shinji. It's great. God, that's so good. Like Masato rescuing Shinji from his father. Never thought I'd see the day. Never thought I would, but it's amazing. And I love it. And she's like, Shinji, this way. And then he's like, get in your Eva. Yui's waiting for you. It's like, oh my God. But the thing of it is Masato, because Shinji kind of calls Masato out saying that she's a hypocrite. She's like, you're wanting me to get in the damn robot for your own means. But Masato's like, I'm not like Gendo. She's like, Gendo wants you to do all of this for himself. He wants to get revenge on God, but he's using you. I want you to make the right decision for yourself, but I'm telling you what's going to happen if you don't do this. So I'm like, you do you, but here's what's going down. And then we have, again, the same, I love that she just drags him around. And Shinji just looks so sad. Like, it's really hard seeing Shinji like this in the manga because he's like, you're both the same. Like, Shinji's just absolutely, Shinji gets like through the ringer in this volume. He's not only told he's not loved by his father, he's dealing with losing everyone around him. He gets slapped by Masato, and then he gets kissed by Masato, and then he knows that Masato dies, and then he tries to get to the Eva to rescue Asuka and sees that that's not going to happen. So it's like all these bad things happen to Shinji, and it's terrifying. But yeah, I will forgive Sadamoto for doing these awful covers of Masato being near death for the one that she does of him and Kaji, of her and Kaji. I'll take it. I love the idea when we cut back to Asuka, though, and she's like, I'm in this broken piece of junk. I'm the one who's broken. And then we cut straight to Rei amongst all the Reis that are broken. It's great, right? And it's still so creepy. Gendo is creepy in the manga where he's like, we're going to go back to where you belong. And he has the hand with the eye on it. And she just looks at him so indifferently. Like, if you told me she was going to betray Gendo at this point, I'd believe it. I believe it. I'm curious if she's going to do that. I wonder if the rebuild, if it's going to be like the rebuilds where she betrays him in this version. But what I do like is the sunflower metaphor with Asuka and the mom, where she figures it out. Like, Shinji has been given this giant dialogue from Masato, this exposition dump as they travel to get to the Eva unit. Whereas Asuka, she's inside the Eva unit and she realizes about her mom. Her mom is a lot nicer in this version than Yui's kind of is in the previous volumes where she looks very scary. Asuka's mom in this looks really like kind. And I like the idea that we get a little bit of seeing how Asuka pieced everything together to know how the AT fields work to get it finally. Whereas Masato has to explain it to Shinji. But yeah. And that's when they realize that Asuka's alive. We have all the deal with her fighting the Eva series and they start to appear. Yeah, it's great. I really just love the action of this volume and how it's drawn. Like Sadamoto, like all the work that it took. And then showing like the Eva series appearing. It's like, which makes sense. This all happened after End of Evangelion had came out. So Sadamoto could just look at End of Evangelion and be like, okay, what do I want to take from it and use? And what do I not want to use? That's really cool. All right. And then meanwhile, I love too that when Masato and Shinji show up in the car that's beaten up, the car actually looks like it's falling apart, like a wheel falls off of it, right? It looks like they're literally about to die. And we get the blood coming over Asuka and her Eva unit. We get them managing to make it to the elevator, her telling Shinji and giving her necklace. She does kiss Shinji like she does in the movie. It's fine. All right. And then poor Shinji. Poor Shinji. It is really sad that at least, so the question is, one thing that makes me wonder if the instrumentality thing is going to go like it did in End of Evangelion is because in End of Evangelion, Misato's just on the ground and we see Rei, like the little figure of Rei pop up before she poofs. Here, she like has a grenade and like launches the grenade, right? So it is a little bit different. So I'm curious to see what is going to be different between End of Evangelion and instrumentality versus how Sadamoto interprets it. That's going to be interesting. But man, the way they draw Shinji in these last couple chapters is pretty incredible. And then we have like Yui. He's like, "Mother, you're here." Okay. All right. Okay. That's the crazy thing. I thought where this manga volume was going to end, if I'm honest. I said it in the reaction that I was like, oh, that ended somewhere different. I thought that the manga volume was going to end with Asuka being torn apart. I thought we were going to get to the point where Shinji gets in the EVA unit, goes up top, and sees Asuka getting torn apart by the EVA series. That's why I thought this volume was going to end. But no, they're going to save that trauma for us for episodes for volumes 13 and 14. No worries. Oh my god. Right? No worries. We're all good. So yeah, we do have a segment here from Carl Gustav Horn, which I'm assuming is like one of the producers or editors for this. And it's voice actors Tiffany Grant, who's for the English dub, and Yuko Miyamura reflect on their most famous roles. Series editor note. So I guess Carl Gustav Horn is a series editor. This volume of the manga sees the return to action of Asuka, the second and most recent of the new Evangelion anime films. You Cannot Advance 2009 brings Asuka back as well. Oh, so this was published fairly later. Okay, so these were published a lot later. Interesting. Volume 4 of the manga featured an essay by Asuka's Japanese voice actress Yuki Miyamura written in 1997 when the Evangelion phenomenon was still young. But Asuka remains an iconic character even in the incredible future of 2011. And with her recent revival in both anime and manga, I thought now might be an appropriate time to follow up, this time with Asuka's English language voice actor Tiffany Grant as well. It's not a common thing for the Japanese and English actors of an anime to meet and become good friends as well, but that's what happened in the case of Yuko and Tiffany, as you will see. My sincere thanks goes to Tiffany Grant, Yuko Miyamura, and to Christine Bisbee, who translated Miss Miyamura's remarks. That's so cool! Asuka's voice actresses are friends? That's awesome. I like that. Also, the fact that Volume 4 came out in 1997 and Volume 12 is coming out in 2011 is a bit crazy. Interesting. All right, Tiffany Grant. Sometime in early 1998, Matt Greenfield encouraged me to write an essay defending Asuka from her critics. I did, and you can read it on my website. At that point, as I recall, about half of the EVA TV series had been released on home video, 2 episodes per VHS about every other month for around $30. That was a lot for the 1990s. Please keep in mind that I had only recently finished recording the TV series. There was as yet no English release of Death and Rebirth, End of Evangelion, Director's Cut Platinum Edition, and there most definitely were no proposed live-action or rebuild films. Back in 1998, I had not yet read any of Sadamoto's manga. Having now read all of it, I was very excited to be able to participate in this project. One especially impactful moment I experienced reading Sadamoto's books was Yuko Miyamura's own essay in Volume 4, which touched me deeply. When we first met, I had her autograph it for me. For this volume, Carl thought it might be interesting if I shared with you how my thoughts about Asuka have evolved over these many years. First, my perspective on Asuka was changed dramatically by working on End of Evangelion, and even more so by the director's cut footage. I said if these scenes had been in the TV show to begin with, people would have had a lot more sympathy for Asuka. But the main thing that happened since 1998 is that Neon Genesis Evangelion has become an international phenomenon. When I started recording this loud, assertive character that often swore in German, I knew I was having a great time with the role and that it was enjoyable for me as an actor. There was no way any of us could have known what lay in store. EVA became cult phenomenon. The enormous popularity of EVA is, I fully understand, the primary reason I get invited to conventions around the world. In this way alone, my association with Asuka has forever altered my life. But I also feel something deeper than the obvious frequent flyer miles is at work here. For several years, I actually denied that I was anything like Asuka, a period I referred to as my I am not Spock phase. I wrote in defense of Asuka during that time. Once I fully embraced my inner Asuka, I realized that many ways that I related to this complex, flawed character. In the past 12 years, I feel I've become even closer to Asuka emotionally. I think Shinji behaves in the way that most of us actually would react, but I believe we all wish we were a little more like Asuka. Speak your mind! Consequences be damned! I find that I don't just defend Asuka now, I actually admire her. I don't know how I'll feel in another 12 years, but if you don't like Asuka just a little bit, I have only one thing to say. What are you, stupid? I love that! Yeah. Honestly, I like Asuka a lot. I feel she gets a bad rap, and I feel like that was one of the reasons why I was a little bit unhappy with her in the rebuilds, getting kind of shoved aside for Mari's character, because I was like, no! I was fully waiting on her to I wanted to see her in the rebuilds more because I like her character a lot. I'm like, okay, so that's cool. Yuko Miyamura. To be honest, a long time ago, I used to hate Asuka in Evangelion. If I were to comment using Asuka's words, I would say, I hate everybody. As to why I felt this way, well, I think the best way to describe it is to say that it was close to the feeling of being bullied. If a person has been bullied, would they want to remember it? I don't think they would. Acting the part of Asuka was lots of fun at first. However, as Asuka started to mentally break down, acting her became quite tough. The part I disliked the most was during the scene when Asuka finally understood the meaning of the AT field. Just when she was being able to mentally become strong and confident again, she was attacked by the mass-produced units and brutalized. That time in the film is really cool, and there are lots of characters I like in it. For Asuka, on the other hand, it's the worst situation ever. Furthermore, after that scene, she's strangled by Shinji with such apathy, and that's where the series ends. The mass-produced units, the angels, their destiny, it just ends with all of them being defeated. I closed with the Asuka inside of me, deep within my heart. While she was inside there, I didn't really like to bring her out. Remembering my complex feelings for Asuka in Evangelion was quite hard for me, and I didn't like it. This all changed when I first met and talked to Asuka's English voice actor, Tiffany. Tiffany, as another person who acted as Asuka, was the only one who could understand the pain that I felt as acting as Asuka. We both understood all the difficult emotions about Asuka and her complex personality, and we talked about many things. After this, the feelings within me towards Asuka became more caring and understanding. Even though at first I felt anger and dislike for Asuka, I now hold her close to my heart, and I even think of her like a daughter. Up until Asuka had to deal with all the pain, sadness, and sorrow by herself, now it's different. I'm with her. Today, I'm a mother myself and raising my own daughter. The feelings I have for my child are similar to what I feel for Asuka. Even though it's different from my own real-life situation, Asuka is an important existence to me, and I feel I'm able to accept her into my life. What destiny lies ahead for Asuka? Furthermore, what choice will she make? Whatever happens, I will accept everything about Asuka. I will cheer her on because I feel I am close to her. No matter what, I will defend Asuka. It has been about 10 years since the time when the other units took Asuka and Shinji and tried to strangle her. And now a new Evangelion has begun. In the new movies, the once complex Asuka is now happier. I'm excited to see how Asuka stands and faces her destiny in the new movies compared to Asuka's fate from 10 years ago of being defeated. If I were to say a comment in the new movie in Asuka's words, it would be, "You hurt my pride. I'll get it back to you 10 times more." I like this confident side of Asuka. Whatever becomes of Asuka in the world of Eva, I will always love Asuka the most. Yeah, that is, at the time they're doing the second rebuild. So yeah, in the first two rebuilds, I'd say, yeah, she's right. Asuka is a lot better in those first two. It's the third and fourth one that I'm like, ah! But I do agree with her that Asuka is at least happier, especially in the first two, and she's a different character. She doesn't have the trauma of her mom from those ones, right? Once again, I would like to thank Tiffany, Yuko, and Christine. Although it's great to see the friendship between these two voice actors just on a human level, I think it also sets a good example for our two, sometimes struggling industries themselves. I wonder whether the Japanese and the Western sides wouldn't both benefit from more personal contacts and understanding. And I think I see that more. It's interesting this was written in 2011, because now I feel like there are, like with Bleach restarting, there was a press release where the voice actors for Ichigo, both the English dub and the Japanese, they actually met for a session together or an interview. So I thought that was cool. So I do think it's trending more that there are more interactions maybe with the dub and the original voice actors, but I wish there were more too. That would be awesome. Something Tiffany said took me back to 1998 when I was editing the early parts of this manga. But at the time, I was also an editor writing about anime at Viz Media's America magazine, and the $30 Tiffany mentions for 2 episodes was pretty standard for the whole US anime industry, not just the Evangelion release. So that meant you'd have to pay $390 for the whole series. In the late 90s dollars, with inflation, that'd be more like $500 today. And that was for VHS format, with all its built-in limitations compared to DVD. No special features, no chapter skipping, no separate audio or subtitle tracks. If you wanted dubbed or subtitled, you had to buy a whole different set of tapes. And of course, lesser video and audio quality. It's something to think about the next time a US anime DVD release seems expensive. Oh, that's the best plug ever. That is the best plug ever. Because no, that's so true. That's so true. I grew up in the 90s, and as a kid, everything was on VHS up until like the late 90s into the early 2000s. And yeah, you didn't have special features. If your tape had a built-in interview, I remember my dad bought my brother and I in 1998 the Star Wars. It was the original series, but it wasn't the special edition, but it was the set that had the interview from George Lucas where he was talking about the Phantom Menace. And my brother and I would rewind that over and over again because we thought it was like an Easter egg. We're like, oh, there's something special on this VHS. And it was just a standard interview, but it wasn't the movie itself. It was like a special feature. That's so crazy. But yeah, you basically were spending about $500 per language in the 90s for that set. I won't complain about the $30 I spent for Run with the Wind on Blu-ray the other day. Nope, won't complain at all. Amazing. Postscript. So we got a postscript here. I remember the first time I saw episode 24 of the anime. It was the same way I saw all of the series. There used to be this place in the Kintetsu building in San Francisco's Japantown, downstairs from Kinokuniya, that would rent of tapes of new shows recorded off of Japanese TV. How it worked was that every 4th episode, someone in Japan would airmail off another tape to the store. Every 4th one, because 4 episodes were what you could fit on VHS at normal speed. This was 1996, an age where the internet brought riches instead of ruin. And being airmail, it got there in a few days, meaning that if you rented it as soon as it came in, for a day or two, you would be caught up with the Japanese audience. With Neon Genesis Evangelion, which seemed to raise the stakes not only for itself, but for television anime with every 4th episode, you're watching it in real time. And 24 divided by 6 tapes, of course, 4, the number of death, as even a Japanese dropout as myself knows. They teach you that the first week. So, there we all were in the middle of March, just me and maybe a few dozen other gaijin with other hookups, and several million Japanese watching Kaoru's 12-minute life and 1-minute death. I remember my impressions during that 1 minute going something like this. The first 20 seconds. All right, this is the dramatic pause, the tension's building. Any moment it will. The next 20 seconds. Well, for God's sake, it's called animation. Hey, I bet the storyboards for this didn't take too long to draw. I can practically see the budget savings add up. It's like watching the meter on an idling taxi and then oddly enough breaking through once again to admiration in the final 20. Wow, as usual, Anno's got a lot of guts. So presumably, did the Hand of O1 a moment later. I laugh off the death, as no one is able in Evangelion's fiction, where these deaths must be an experience for real. Yet in the manga, Sadamoto draws Shinji with at least a smile, the very narrowest of smiles, as the parting gift to him of Kaoru Nagisa, Tebri, the angel of free will. A name more beautiful than its bearer, which was no mean feat. Stop following me, Shinji had told the stray kitten when they first met in Volume 9. I can't take care of you. And then the boy who had not introduced himself, other than to say, I'm lost. I was never meant to be in a place like this. Picked up the kitten, and with his hands, showed what Shinji's choice meant. This is the point where a certain shrill keening went up, not so much from Shinji, but from some segments of the readership, at Sadamoto's sudden and unprecedented use of shock value, a concept surely as foreign to Neon Genesis Evangelion as fan service. Oh, cutting. He had ruined sweet Kaoru, the sweet Kaoru who came to wipe us out, but kindly offered Shinji the option to kill what he loved instead. But it was a kitten somewhere among the hundreds, thousands, millions, and billions of dead people in the Evangelion storyline. I'll bet if we could somehow convince the president to squash a goldfish during his next press conference, I don't know, tell him it's for Rush Week or something, America would suddenly come to the horrified realization that, oh my God, war means death. This is cutting. This is great. Well, okay. Maybe I was a little shocked too, but for different reasons. Like almost every Evangelion fan, my own image of Kaoru was shaped by the anime. When Sadamoto has him make his first appearance at the end of Volume 7, smiling in his tube tequila as rated to Gendo, it looks as if he's going to go along lines similar to how Kaoru was treated in the anime, as Seal's secret child, as much as Rei was Nerves, raised in the darkness and obedience. Indeed, both versions, the two pilots encounter one another to show they are very similar, but not the same. In the anime, Kaoru expresses the very interest and intimacy and connection that Rei as yet can barely articulate, yet both maintain an etherealness about them. Suddenly, Sadamoto gives us this Kichikuzume. And so, yeah, it is true. Before I go on with this, it is true. Yeah. One, anytime you harm an animal, and I'm the same way, I could watch death and destruction of a million people in a show, but they kill that dog. It is a different vibe, right? But I could totally imagine, I hadn't thought about this and talked about this too much, but I could totally imagine the audience of the manga like being up in arms about Kaoru being different in the manga than he is in the anime. I love Kaoru and Shinji, and I'm a fan of the manga, so it's interesting, right? But also that's such a good point too, that in the anime, Rei is emotionally detached and doesn't understand love, and Kaoru in episode 24 seems to already know all about it. And in this, it's reversed, where it's Rei that teaches Kaoru what the meaning of love is. And it's like, oh. You know, if I remember right, regardless of whether in the anime Kaoru liked Shinji or loved Shinji, at no point did Kaoru actually promise that whatever he felt for him would make Shinji happy. It was a natural thing for Shinji to assume, an ass out of you and me, both, see? And there you've got your doujinshi again. Of course, from this evidently beautiful, apparently kind person who said he loved him and said he understood him. What Kaoru understood, though, was how fragile Shinji's heart was. It fascinated him, much as one might wonder at an object of fine crystal. And when you are enchanted by such a thing, your wish is not that it be transformed and made more able to endure, its latticework replaced by steel, or even the simple, tough fiber of a human heart, the kind Masato and Kaji had, surviving a childhood as bad as a children's, to find some kind of happiness or some kind of resilience. There's nothing sadistic or callous about the way anime Kaoru treats Shinji. It's just that, being an angel, he has a little difficulty understanding the human perspective. And that it's not just about he viewed Shinji, but how Shinji viewed him. This is where the manga Kaoru, Sadamoto's Kaoru, shows his difference, and where Sadamoto confirms the value of his interpretation. For various crazy Gaijin reasons, I don't know, maybe because his death takes place before a giant freaking cross to which a being is nailed, and which previously had an artifact called the Spear of Longinus thrust into its side, many EVA fans around the world discuss the idea of Kaoru as a quasi-Christ figure. An orthodox image of Christ was that he was a sinless being. God became man, who permitted himself to suffer for the redemption of sinners, a sacrificial lamb. But that itself is an interesting image. After all, a lamb is something that humans understand as much as Kaoru understood Shinji. That is, with an assigned significance. But the suffering of mankind day to day is far more than just having to walk around donkey and dateless. Actually, figless, Matthew 21:19, let alone the scourge and the nail. It's the state of being impure, of sinning itself. When Christ was said to have been both divine and human, the theologians meant human like Adam was before he ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as referenced in the ugly-ass new logos for Nerve and Seal as seen in the rebuild of Evangelion! Ah! Great. Adam before the fall, in other words. But that's not being a human, the way actual human beings are. What an actual human would experience in even a short life is a state of being a sinner, which at its least argumentative means harming the innocent. Killing a kitten would probably qualify. And knowing love, not in its divine, platonic, and soft vinyl form, but as something flowing, lukewarm, sticky, and heavy, as Kaoru describes it to Shinji after kissing him. How does it feel to have someone like that take an interest in you? He asks Shinji, because to him, it felt like it was slowly constricting my chest, like I couldn't breathe. It gave me the creeps. The creeps. The anime Kaoru would never have gotten the creeps. But then, the anime Kaoru doesn't partake of humanity the way Sadamoto's does. He is indeed Seal's child, raised in secret, but his reflection in Nerve is not Rei, but Shinji, for whom far more secrets were kept. I think one reason some anime Shinji times Kaoru shippers might not like Sadamoto's version is because it's almost as if he's making fun of fanfic. In this version of the story, Kaoru enters combat with Rei and Shinji before the events of episode 24. Exposed to Rei's longing for Shinji during battle, Kaoru angers Shinji by calling her a fool, yet Shinji seeks sanctuary in Kaoru's room afterwards. Kaoru's confusion over his feelings leads to a new level of intimacy between them, but Shinji slaps Kaoru's caressing hand away. Guys don't like guys. Why do you hate me so much? Demands the tousle-headed angel. I mean, one expects the actual creator to keep a certain reserve. And then, as you've read on page 171, Sadamoto, in the best traditions of Evangelion, flips over his trump card. Just as Anno did once with Masato and Shinji, it turns out he wasn't bluffing. And it wasn't fan service. He found that he was actually trying to feel something for Kaoru Nagisa as an artist. As he has done all along with Neon Genesis Evangelion, Sadamoto is making an effort to express the story in a way that is convincing to him, as Evangelion's co-creator, an approach that is often the equal and opposite of Anno's. Whereas Anno gave his persona in making the anime, Sadamoto is taking into his person. Whereas the anime projected a 35-year-old's thought on a 14-year-old named Shinji Ikari, go back and read his interview in Volume 2, which isn't the thoughts of a guy whose involvement was simply sketching the designs. Unless I get into Shinji's head, says Sadamoto, I can't draw the manga. I have to empathize with the character before I can draw. And what his empathy ends up giving us is something more mutual than the anime did between Shinji and Kaoru. Just as Sadamoto had Shinji know ahead of time that Toji was in EVA 03, he prepares an understanding between them. And when tragedy comes, it is deeper for being complicit. Evangelion Lotus. In Volume 10, I recommend that if you wanted to go from WTF to, well, that's fascinating, on EVA, to check out the forums at evamonkey.com. Since then, it's doubled in registered users from 800 to 1740, and now contains over 164 postings as of August 2008, including lengthy threads on topics such as domestic, political overtones of EVA in Japan, whether Rei is made of particle wave matter, and careful documentation of all appearances of the character's panties. In short, it seems very close to becoming the kind of collective superconsciousness Kaoru promises us we can evolve into, if we'll just sign that extinction work order. Before you punch your keyboard, however, this site has also undergone a name change from evamonkey.com to evageeks.org. Oh, okay. Although I wonder perhaps if that change truly symbolizes progress. I'm reminded of Paul Broca's comment that he'd rather be a transformed ape than a degenerate son of Adam. Eva Geeks doesn't have too much on this manga. Its discussion exists as a thread with the subforum Everything Else Evangelion, sort of the way Reverend Lovejoy once described Apu's religion as miscellaneous. Despite the fact that Sadamoto's version was around before the anime, and who knows, might still be unfinished when the new films receive the last re-release director's cuts. Interesting how long this manga's been going on. I sometimes feel that in spite of their different creative approaches, Sadamoto is staying closer to what Anno was trying to say than to the idea that Eva is a million-piece jigsaw. Even if we're true and you found a way to complete it, it doesn't take a Franz Kafka to point out that you've spent years assembling a million-piece jigsaw. In case people didn't get it the first time, Anno literally turned the camera back on the theater and then walked out into the street in the End of Evangelion. I remember seeing a fan version of the film that cut this part out as boring. You've been told many times before Anno pointed to the door, but no one had the guts to leave the temple. Perhaps he gave up after a while and just decided to rebuild it. I'm not in such a good position to criticize, perhaps, as I, in my best otaku way, delighted in the 5 years that Evangelion was a monthly comic book. That's right, it used to be one. You know, those things that with the staples, color, and really small eyes. And in writing its dossier section, which detailed such Eva Soshera as Seal, LCL, and the Spear of Longes, etc., combining what we know from the canonical sources as if this was some kind of church, with speculation couched in the grandiloquent vagueness worthy of that of the Clinton era. If the comic had arisen during the Bush era, the legal theory would have simply been that everything was canonical if the editor said so. Man, this is just so salty. I love it. Most of the dossier articles, the Spear of Longinus was one mysteriously went missing, spawning its own mini conspiracy theory, were reprinted in volumes 5 and 6 of the current graphic novel edition of Eva. Volume 7 continued the tradition with a remarkable word count drawn forth from the mere handful of biblical verses associated with Evangelion. I always sense a certain nervousness when the Bible gets brought up at EvaCon panels, and it's probably because more than one attendee told their parents they were going to church camp that weekend. in case the $9.99 a semester, well, let's be honest, annual tuition, that is the Evangelion manga, wasn't giving you enough gnosis, Volume 8 absolutely dared you to seek out the best of its native criticism. Never mind that it was in Japanese. It could hardly be less comprehensible than graduate semiotics. But again, go back. Tolege, the most important truths that are likely to ever be revealed about Evangelion are in volumes 1 through 4. Anno's statement of attempt. Sadamoto's interview. Yoshito Asari's statement of attempt. Sadamoto's interview. Yoshitaro Asari's anticipation of the pattern of serious critiques would take, and Megumi Ogata, who herself considered Sadamoto the co-creator of the character she portrayed, Yuko Miyamura's and Megumi Hayashibara's confrontation of their roles. What distinguishes all these comments are not just who made them, but that they were within the making of Evangelion itself. They lack coolness, detachment, and hindsight, and thus have the kind of meaning for Eva you can't type, but which you can make for yourself. The only way it can ever mean anything in real time, in reality. Carl Gustav Horn. P.S. It's interesting that among the events portrayed as part of human beings hurting one another, on page 32 are the attacks of September 11th, 2001. Despite the fact that in Evangelion's timeline, that date was almost a year after the second impact. If I go to Eva Geeks on you for a moment, it seems somewhat implausible that the conspiracy to attack the World Trade Center would have gone ahead as planned, given that Lower Manhattan, like the original Tokyo, would presumably have already been evacuated underwater, thanks to the rapid melting of the Antarctic ice cap. On the other hand, it's part of the official Evangelion timeline that the week following the second impact saw both the outbreak of an India-Pakistan conflict and the detonation of a nuclear bomb in Tokyo by unknown parties, showing that the human race was still able to take a little time out for war and terrorism, despite the fact that it was already facing the greatest catastrophe in recorded history. Failing that, one can always say the reference to 9/11 falls under the idea of many possible paths within the instrumentality, although Seal seems to favor one of destiny and control rather than choice and freedom. Or simply, my favorite explanation for everything, lol, editors. Oh my gosh, that was like so salty and interesting, and yeah, I really like that. Okay, yeah, I really like that a lot. Man, this volume, I do, so this all came out first published in Japan in 2006, 2007, 2010. Wow. Isn't that crazy that Sadamoto's been working on this for so long? Insanity. It'd be really cool to see exactly where that came up at and how it's changed, like where the last volumes end at. If they were made like in 2011, 2012, like how many years went between them? That's gonna be really interesting. This was great. These 3 volumes, I agree. It's very difficult. I can see why if you were a hardcore, because we like basically, you know, when the anime was going on, we were like all about episode 24. It was like the best episode of the season. It's amazing. Kaoru's on screen for 12 minutes and it's wonderful. And then when you watch the rebuilds, you're like, yeah, we'll admit there were some rose-colored glasses moments. And then, you know, you get to this manga and Sadamoto's like, yeah, here's like a more maybe realistic take on it, but it works. Like I said, because Shinji's differently in the manga. It's a different Shinji, so a different Kaoru works as well. And I kind of feel like with Horn's interview there at the end, I'm curious, you know, what were people's takes on how Shinji was different? Because I could see people being up in arms about how Kaoru was different, especially killing the kitten. But in the same vein, it's like, well, if you're okay with Shinji being different, if you're okay with that, and you're okay with Rei being different, then Kaoru being different is okay too. So, and I'm kind of in that boat. I think if you had kept the characters the same throughout, but suddenly Kaoru and Shinji's relationship was the one thing that was different, I would have a problem with it. And I'd be like, oh, why are you doing that? But the very fact that from like volume 1 on, the characters are different, I think it's okay. And I kind of like that Sadamoto had the guts to say, no, this is my interpretation, and we're going to have this really complex relationship. And then, like he said, I'm going to pull out my trump card at the end and give it to you and show you what Shinji was thinking all along. And it's like, yeah, no. It's great. I loved these. So I'm very sad that we only have 2 volumes left of the manga. So what's going to happen is that next week we'll look at volumes 13 and 14. Also over on Patreon, I'm going to be putting out a post probably the afternoon that these volumes come out. The afternoon that either the afternoon that this volume comes out or the afternoon of the volumes 13 and 14 on Patreon. Probably, actually, you know what? I'm changing my mind. I had this already pre-scheduled on Patreon and I'm going to change it. So later today, as you're watching this on Patreon, over on Patreon, this afternoon, I'm going to put out a post that will be asking for your questions that you have about Neon Genesis Evangelion that you would like me to answer with my opinions about, or what you'd like me to cover, because I want to do a final wrap-up of Neon Genesis. It is not going to be 6 hours long. I'm going to tell you all right now. No. I can't do it. Nope, it's not going to be 6 hours long, but maybe like an hour or two where I talk about, I definitely want to do a character tier. That'd be fun, just for funsies. I want to rank the episodes because that would be a lot of fun. I want to basically talk about the pros and cons differences between the rebuilds, the manga, and the anime now that I've finished all 3 at that point. And then if you've got any other things you want me to cover, I would be happy to talk about there. So that's going to be on Patreon later today. That post is going to come out. Feel free to answer it if you'd like. And we'll go from there. So I'm just doing it through Patreon though, because that's kind of like a perk. So we'll see. But yeah, I really have liked this manga so far, and I can't believe I'm almost to the end of it. But like Horn states, Anno wanted you to get out of the theater and go. So we're nearing the end of the film. So it's 13 and 14 next week, and then the week after we'll be doing a recap and then starting a new show. So I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. But in the meantime, I hope you also have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with the final 2 volumes of Neon Genesis Evangelion.